Das Radikal.
Come to Iceland, see the sights, see the whales, meet the locals, get violated by their criminals. So the National Police Commissioner of Iceland released another report about the status of organized crime in Iceland. And I am very much delighted to inform you that, just kidding, it's absolutely terrible. In fact, it's probably worse than I thought. And I did read through most of the report, so I'm going to try to condense its contents into hopefully a short video. So, organized crime in Iceland. Apparently the analysis department of the National Police Commissioner's office uses a 4-point metric to calculate the threat level, I suppose, posed from, well, in this case, organized crime, and just gonna look at that real quick. I don't quite know how this metric works, but as you can see here on the screen, this is how it looks like. So it goes from green to yellow to red to black. Guess the best way to translate would be green for threat level low, yellow for threat level minimal, red for threat level serious, and black for threat level extreme. And we are, according to this report, at a code black.
Code black.
Black? Huh. That's the worst color there is. No offense there, Carl.
So the report notes that due to the growing population of Iceland, growing due to natural growth, but also immigration, asylum seekers, and foreign temporary workers, people who migrate to Iceland temporarily to work, either for longer or shorter periods of time, the room for the Icelandic so-called black economy has also grown exponentially. Now, maybe some people may watch this and think, oh, here we go again, blaming the immigrants, are we? Now, I'm not here to do that, but it needs to be understood also that, say, 30 years ago, immigrants didn't have organized gang in Iceland because they didn't want to. They didn't have organized gangs in Iceland because they couldn't. Because there wasn't enough of them, and also they would have stuck out like sore thumbs and been captured immediately. So it's not like now that we have an X amount of immigrants that some of them all of a sudden decided, now there's enough of us, now we can finally commit the crimes that we've been building our numbers up for. No, it is that if you have enough people, a large enough society that it can shelter a network of organized crime. Having said that, I want to note for the record, though, that an ever larger amount of Icelandic policemen and police unions are calling for Iceland to leave the Schengen Agreement. The Schengen Agreement is agreements between many European countries regarding free flow of migration, something like that. I don't know the small printed details, but basically it makes it easier for people to migrate to Iceland, and with very little documentation, and a lot of policemen are concerned that this is the reason why they find it hard to combat organized crime. But the report also notes that there is definitely also growth in Icelandic natural-born organized crime. So yes, Icelandic organized crime is definitely a thing. Now, one of the biggest threats to average citizens is marked as the increased availability of very strong narcotics. And right now, especially opioid-related drugs, and 2018 was actually the year in Iceland which saw the absolute highest amounts of drug overdoses in our entire history. I think over that entire year, about as many people per capita died in Iceland from overdoses as were dying at the same time in the United States. So yeah, that's a lot. They also note that there is a increased availability of cocaine, very increased availability of cocaine. This is due to the international cocaine market. Market prices for cocaine are down, so they're making this product stronger to be able to sell it better, I guess. And international gangs are focusing now more on Europe because the markets in America appear to be slowly but surely, well, maybe not getting smaller, but are not growing as I don't know. At least more cocaine in Europe nowadays. That's the moral of this story. But the biggest problem, however, might also be money laundering and tax fraud. It is estimated that the government of Iceland is annually losing 100 million kronur due to tax evasions and money laundering. And this figure does not even include offshore tax havens. So God knows what the actual actual number is, but percentile, it's in the 4 to 6. I think it was like around 4% of the country's annual GDP being lost in this manner, which is a lot, obviously. The National Police Commissioner's office believes that there are several gangs consisting of members from mainly 7 countries, although a few more are noted as having possible members from. Well, the most prevalent nationalities involved in organized crime appear to be Poland, Lithuania, Romania and Albania. Poland and Lithuania is not that surprising. I mean, that's where most Icelandic immigrants come from. Albania I find particularly curious because there are very few Albanians in Iceland, I can tell you that. And also, it's a tiny country. I mean, how many immigrants from Albania could there possibly be? Now, the report also notes the alarming rate to which how immigrants in Iceland often fall victims to organized crime. Vastly oversimplifying, but one of the things that's a huge problem is that criminals already in Iceland will get will get somebody to go to the country and for them to vouch for them so that they can get into the country or to do all the paperwork for them or whatever. They will then have these people to do their bidding, basically, whether it is as prostitutes or small-time thieves or whatever. So sometimes small-time thieves or small-time criminals operating in Iceland will be so indebted to the criminal overlords who brought them here that they are kind of victims of human trafficking as well as being criminals at the same time. I know, it's a hugely complex issue that I can't easily fit into this one video. I'm amazed how short the report was, given how informative it was. If you read Icelandic, I highly recommend you check it out. I'll leave a link for it in the description of the video. And a lot of this gang activity is global, so small-time criminals will come to Iceland in waves. They will steal what it is they specialize in stealing. Sometimes they'll be car thieves, sometimes electronics thieves, sometimes whatever kind of thieves or fraudsters or whatever, and then they will take whatever and they will leave a large share of what they got to their crime lords, gang overlords, whatever you want to call it, their head honchos. That's a stupid word. Then they will move on to another country and another wave will take their place, so there is always a rotation going on, so it's very hard for the police to track these groups. The report also notes that while Icelandic organized crime, that is organized crime made up by Icelanders, is often separate from the foreign elements, there's also a lot of instances of them working together. The report also notes that somewhat unusually, considering other North European countries, often foreigners from different nationalities will work together, although it's not the common thing, but but there are a lot of cases of that. But the report notes that it's probably due to the seclusion and small size of Iceland that many of the gangs have simply found that to be a tool of necessity in order to better thrive in Iceland, because Iceland is still too small for them to operate in the same overly nationalistic manner as one would expect in some other countries. But still, a lot of Icelandic gangs, or foreign Icelandic gangs, whatever, still appear to be mostly confined to whatever nationality they originate from. Lastly, the report talks about how to best combat this situation. Now, although the report notes that some additional manpower is probably required, they also talk about that there needs to be a betterment in the organizational department. Basically, policing in Iceland needs to become a lot more smarter. A much higher percentage of cases needs to get solved somehow, and that means reforms on the judicial level, among other things. So organization, surveillance, preventive measures, and smart policing. That seems to be the four main things that are needed here. I'd say Icelandic policing is already fairly smart, but still, comparative to a lot of other neighboring countries, we're still way behind in a lot of this regard. But it appears that the government is looking into the matter, at least. I don't know what's going to come out of it, but the Minister of Justice for Iceland, for example, is apparently, well, she says she is looking into things, shaping a new future plan to get Icelandic law enforcement up to speed with the situation. How that will play out is not good to say right now. It's also very sad that just today, or yesterday, I don't remember, a news article came out saying that apparently a lot of Icelandic special force police members are apparently very happy with some of the leadership decisions of the National Police Commissioner of Iceland, Haraldur Jóhannesson. He has been police commissioner, by the way, for 21 years, 22 years. And while the report also notes that the highest threat stems from, well, loss of revenue due to money laundering and tax fraud, there's also the clear and present threat of ever harder drugs reaching Iceland, getting into circulation among users, and, well, more people dying of overdoses, as we're seeing. It's actually pretty curious because overall drug consumption rates in Iceland are not overly low, not overly high, but they certainly are much higher than they used to be before, but a much higher number of addicts appear to be in a much worse shape than before, owing to the fact that more of them are doing much harder drugs than they had been exposed to previously. That's why we're seeing so many more overdoses in the past few months. But there's also the increased threat of violence. Now, according to the report, the biggest threat would be posed between possible gangs combating each other in some form, but it is also not excluded that violence against civilians, for whatever reason you may imagine, could also be on the rise. Though so far there's no data to back that up. That is just protection for the future that we'll just have to wait and see and hope and pray, I suppose. So yeah, I just want to briefly touch upon the current situation with organized crime in Iceland. It's an ongoing battle that we'll probably hear a lot more of in due time. Anyway, thank you for watching. I am Johan Phoenix, and have a nice day.
Das Radikal.